Song Wanning stood in the lobby of the Shengding Group Tower, craning her neck to take in the vaulted ceiling and the crystal chandelier suspended from its center. She tightened her grip on the resume in her hands. The building was even more imposing than she had imagined. The polished marble floor reflected the hurried silhouettes of professionals moving through the space in their business attire. A long line of applicants waited at the front reception desk to check in. She stood somewhere in the middle, wearing a gray blazer and skirt set she'd picked up from a thrift store. Her hair neatly pinned at the nape of her neck. The most valuable thing she owned hung around her neck. An old silver chain with a thumbnail-sized sapphire pendant that caught the fluorescent light and refracted it into a deep, oceanic blue. It was the only thing her mother had left her. She reached up and touched the cool stone, remembering her mother's final days lying in bed. Her thin, trembling hand fastening it around her daughter's neck. "Wear it," her mother had whispered, her voice as light as wind through a crack in the window. "Someone will recognize it." Back then, Song Wanning had been 14. She hadn't understood. After her mother passed, she'd lived alone for 12 years, putting herself through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. She'd sent out countless resumes, cycled through 4 or 5 different positions. The necklace had never come off, but it had never drawn anyone's attention either. Until today, she walked into the Shengding Group interview room. The receptionist called her number. "Song Wanning, 28th floor, interview room 3. She took a deep breath and stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for 28. As the car ascended, she checked her reflection in the polished metal walls, smoothing down her collar and making sure the necklace lay flat against her collarbone. She didn't know if she'd stammer through nerves, but she knew the one thing her mother left her would be there with her. The interview room door was frosted glass. Through it, she could see the silhouette of a woman seated inside. When she pushed the door open, the woman looked up from flipping through her resume. Liu Mingwei. Song Wanning recognized her. The chairman of Shengding Group, one of the most powerful women in the business world, a frequent face on the covers of financial magazines. She was thinner in person than in photographs, with sharp shoulders and a crisp black blazer. Just sitting there, she radiated a commanding presence. She turned a page in the resume and gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." Song Wanning Saturday, placing a copy of her resume on the table, sitting straight-backed. But Liu Mingwei's gaze didn't linger on the resume. It traveled over it, fixing instead on her face, no on her neck. The sapphire caught the warm light of the interview room and glowed with a soft, deep blue luster. Liu Mingwei's gaze locked onto it, like she'd been struck. Her fingers tightened on the edges of the resume, knuckles turning white. She stared at the pendant for nearly 10 seconds. Song Wanning felt the hairs on the back of her neck prickle. She opened her mouth to introduce herself. Liu Mingwei suddenly stood, her chair scraping sharply against the floor. She rounded the desk and came to stand directly in front of Song Wanning, leaning down, her eyes fixed on the blue stone at her throat. Her lips trembled. The color drained from her face. Her voice was hoarse, nothing like the commanding presence the news always showed. "That necklace around your neck. Where did you get it?" Startled, Song Wanning leaned back in her chair, instinctively raising a hand to shield the sapphire. "It was my mother's. She left it to me." "What was your mother's name?" Liu Mingwei cut her off, her voice rapid and fractured. "She was called Zhou Zi Hi." Liu Mingwei stumbled backward, her back hitting the edge of the desk. Her eyes instantly welled with tears. Those eyes that had intimidated countless rivals in the boardroom now looked fragile, on the verge of shattering. She stared at Song Wanning, the unfamiliar, yet faintly familiar young face, and her voice trembled as it forced its way out of her throat. "Zhou Zi. She was my sister." Song Wanning went rigid. She stared at the notoriously formidable chairman as tears spilled down her cheeks. Watched Liu Mingwei reach out a trembling hand toward the necklace before pulling it back. Watched the sapphire catch the glint of her aunt's tears and refract an even deeper shade of blue. The interview never continued that day. Liu Mingwei cried for a long time in her office, holding Song Wanning's hands and stroking the bare ring finger where no ring sat. "You look just like your mother did when she was young," she said. "She's been gone 26 years. I thought I'd never find her again," she said. "Wanning. Your name is Wanning, right? Your mother chose that name for you." Song Wanning sat in the chair, her hands clasped in Liu Mingwei's, her eyes burning. She had lived with her mother for 14 years. Before she died, her mother had only said, "Someone will recognize it." She never knew who, where, or how they'd appear. Now she knew. As she left, Lu Mingwei personally walked her to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, Lu Mingwei, red-eyed, said to her, "Wanting, start next week. I'll arrange a position for you. You'll work under me." The moment the elevator doors slid shut, Song Wanting saw Lu Mingwei wipe the corner of her and at a gesture identical to the way her mother used to wipe away tears. Song Wanting leaned against the elevator wall, looking down at the sapphire on her chest. It lay quietly against her collarbone, glowing softly under the fluorescent light. She touched it gently. The hollow place in her heart that had been empty for 12 years felt like something warm was slowly filling it in. That night, she tossed and turned in her rented apartment. Unable to sleep, her phone suddenly buzzed. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. A low, slightly magnetic male voice came through. "Song Wanting." She froze. "Yes. Who's calling?" "I'm Lu Yenji." A brief pause. "Lu Mingwei's son. My mother said you've come back." The words "come back" circled in her ears. She sat up, gripping the phone, her neck prickling. "Mr. Lu." "Hello." Silence on the other end. Then Lu Yenji spoke again, his voice a degree softer than before. "If it's convenient, let's meet tomorrow. There are some things I'd like to tell you in person." Song Wanting held the phone, her fingertips curling slightly. Her heart inexplicably beat faster. She heard herself say, "Okay." After hanging up, she set the phone on the nightstand and rolled over, burying her face in her pillow. A sliver of city light filtered through the gap in the curtains, casting a dim yellow patch across the room. She reached under the pillow, touched the necklace, and closed her eyes, thinking, "Tomorrow I'll meet the other half of my mother's family." She didn't know what her cousin looked like, but his voice on the phone reminded her of the deep blue light refracted by the sapphire. Quiet, deep, and something else she couldn't quite name, but that made her heart flutter strangely. Chapter 2. The next evening, Song Wanting followed the address to a small cafe. It was tucked away on a quiet side street in the city center, with an old-fashioned warm yellow lamp hanging above the door. When she pushed the door open, a bell above the counter chimed. The air inside smelled of roasted coffee beans and aged wood. By the window sat a man. He turned at the sound of the bell. Song Wanting's steps faltered slightly. She'd never seen Lu Yenji in person, but his photo occasionally appeared in financial magazines. Vice president of Shengding Group, Lu Mingwei's only child. Known for his sharp methods, though he rarely appeared in the media, he looked younger than his photos. He wore a dark gray lightweight sweater, sleeves casually rolled to his forearms, a white ceramic cup in his hand. When his gaze landed on her, it paused for just a beat. He stood. He was tall. Well over 6 feet. He gave her a slight nod. Song Wanting, yes. She walked over and sat across from him, setting her bag on the chair beside her. "Mr. Lu, just call me Yenji." He sat back down and pushed a cup toward her. A white ceramic cup filled with hot tea. The warmth bled through the cup into her palm, carrying the faint fragrance of jasmine. Song Wanting looked down at the tea and thought, "He doesn't know what I like to drink." But he got it right by accident. My mother cried for a long time after she got home. Lu Yenji began. His gaze rested on her face, his tone steady but carrying an undercurrent of warmth. "She searched for my aunt for 26 years. You showing up. She's overjoyed." Song Wanting's fingers tightened around the teacup. "My mother never told me she had family." Lu Yenji looked at her, silent for a few seconds. Then he pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase and set it on the table. He didn't push it over right away, just looked down at the old wax seal on the flap, worn and blurred with age. "My mother asked me to give you this." He slid the envelope across. "Take a look." Song Wanting unsealed it and pulled out a photograph. The paper was yellowed, edges curled, bearing the fine cracks of age. In the photo, 2 young women sat side by side under a blooming tree, both in white blouses and floral skirts, smiling broadly. The one on the left had a gentle, serene smile. The one on the right grinned wider, showing a row of even teeth. Song Wanting's gaze locked onto the face on the left. Her nose stung with sudden, overwhelming emotion. That was her mother. Young, vibrant, happy. A version of Zhou Ji, so different from the gaunt, weathered woman she remembered from her later years. But the same eyes, the same nose, the same tiny freckle at the corner of her mouth. "That's my mom on the right." Lu Yenji pointed to the smiling woman. "Your mother is my aunt." They were sisters. Song Wanting stared at the 2 identical sapphire pendants hanging at both their throats in the photo. Suddenly she understood her mother's dying words. She'd thought the necklace was just a keepsake, but it was a key. 26 years ago. Lu Yenji's voice continued. measured and unhurried. My aunt fell in love with someone. The family didn't approve. My grandparents were stubborn back, then that they forced her to break it off. She refused. After a few arguments, she left one night. She took nothing but that necklace. Song Wanning's knuckles whitened around the photo. My mother looked for her for 2 decades. Placed newspaper ads. Hired private investigators. Every year, she sent people to every place she might have gone. No word. My grandparents passed away. And before they went, they kept murmuring her name. The last lead my mother got was 6 years ago. Someone said they'd seen her in another city. By the time my mother got there, she'd already moved. The cafe was quiet. Somewhere in the back, someone was grinding coffee beans. A low hum, like white noise. Song Wanning looked down at Zhou Ji's smile in the photograph. A smile she hadn't seen on her mother's face since she was 10. When did your mother pass? Lu Yinji asked softly. 12 years ago. Song Wanning's voice was rough. Illness. Before she died. She never told me anything about our family. She just made me wear the necklace and said someone would recognize it. Lu Yinji watched her reddening eyes and clenched fingers. He nudged her now cooling tea closer to her hand. His fingers brushed the rim of the cup as he pulled back, producing a faint click. Song Wanning. He said her name, steadier than on the phone. You coming back? My mother is happier than she even realizes. She spaced out 3 times in the board meeting this afternoon. Her assistant said she was smiling to herself. Song Wanning looked up. In the warm cafe light, Lu Yinji's features seemed softer than before. His eyes were a deep brown, just like Lu Mingwei's. But compared to his mother's sharp, piercing business gaze, his held something she couldn't quite read. Like the surface of the deep sea lit by moonlight. Report to the company tomorrow. He asked. Chairman Lu said I should work under her. He nodded, lifted his coffee cup, and took a sip, setting it down. He added, the executive office is on 29. I'm on 30. If you need anything, you can come find me directly. Song Wanning tucked the photograph back into the envelope, her thumb brushing over the yellowed paper. She stood to leave. Lu Yinji rose as well. He was nearly a head taller than her. When she looked up, he was looking down. Their gazes meeting for a moment. I'll drive you back. No. I can take that. It's evening. I'll drive you. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, his tone calm, but brooking no argument. Song Wanning opened her mouth, then closed it, picked up her bag, and walked out of the cafe. The evening wind carried the damp chill of early spring. Lu Yinji walked on the outside, keeping a measured distance. They passed a sycamore tree at the mouth of the alley, streetlight filtering through the branches, casting fragmented, swaying shadows on the ground. Out of the corner of her eye, Song Wanning saw his left hand hanging at his side. Long fingers, clean nails, bare ring finger. She looked away and told herself, he's my cousin, my mother's sister's son, family by blood. But her heart, when he saw her to her door and stood under the streetlight, saying see you tomorrow, still beat 1 beat faster for no reason at all. Upstairs, she stood at the window looking down. Lu Yinji's car remained at the curb, headlights on. After a long moment, it slowly pulled away. She leaned against the windowsill and touched the sapphire at her throat, whispering to the blue stone, Mom, you never told me I had a cousin like him either. That night, she couldn't sleep, tossing until 2 a.m. She pulled out her phone and searched. Lu Yinji Shengding Group. Several news articles and a video from an industry forum last month came up. She watched 3 minutes and turned it off. The way he spoke on camera was different, more formal, more distant, all business. But last night at the cafe, when he'd handed her the tea, the way he said Song Wanning had dropped a half degree lower than in the interview. She put her phone down and rolled over, burying her face in the pillow, the sapphire pressed against her collarbone, cool and reassuring, as if her mother, somewhere beyond, had given her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Chapter 3 Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. Song Wanning appeared promptly at the executive office on the 29th floor. She'd gotten up earlier than usual, spent half an hour the night before staring at her closet, finally settling on a cream blouse with dark gray trousers, hair neatly pinned, necklace positioned just above her collar. She'd adjusted it in the mirror until it was noticeable but not ostentatious. Taken 3 deep breaths, and walked in. The receptionist spotted her and stood, her smile warmer than during the registration process. Ms. Song, Chairman Lu said to go straight to her office when you arrived. As she passed through the cubicles, eyes landed on her like follow spots. Curious, appraising, laced with unmistakable gossip. She heard the hushed murmurs behind her. She's the one Chairman Lu brought in herself. Distant relative, they say. A direct hire. Distant relative. Chairman Lu made tea for her with her own hands. Believe that. Song Wanning's neck tightened. She quickened her pace into the chairman's office at the end of the hall. Liu Mingwei was already inside, wearing a forest green silk blouse, makeup flawless. Seeing Song Wanning enter, she smiled and beckoned her over. Wanning, come sit. On the desk sat a cup of jasmine tea at just the right temperature, and a signed employment contract next to a full set of new ID badges and access cards. Liu Mingwei slid the contract over. I've listed the position as Executive Senior Assistant. You'll start by learning the full scope of operations under me. Salary and benefits are at manager level. Details in the attachments. Song Wanning glanced at the numbers on the contract. Her pupils contracted slightly. It was more than triple what she'd earned at her previous job. Her pen hovered, and she looked up at Liu Mingwei. Chairman Liu, this compensation, call me Andy. Liu Mingwei cut her off, her tone warm but firm. Privately, call me Andy. At work, Chairman Liu is fine, but privately, Auntie. She reached over and gently patted the back of Song Wanning's hand, her palm warm. Your mother is gone. You're back here now. I've got your back from now on. Song Wanning's nose stung sharply. She bent her head and signed the contract. As the pen moved across the paper, she saw her own hand trembling, not from nerves, but because the thing that had been lodged in her chest for 12 years was slowly, steadily being pried open by someone she'd never expected to meet. That morning, Liu Mingwei personally walked her through every floor. Executive office, finance, marketing, product development. At each stop, she introduced her. This is Wanning, my new assistant. Everyone, please take good care of her. Her tone carried an unmistakable warmth that landed with every department head. The chairman personally escorting her around. Ever seen that before? Not once. Not even her own son got that treatment. What's this Song Wanning's background? Don't know. Heard her last name is Zhou. Hey, you think? The gossip rippled down from the 29th floor like a tide. Song Wanning sat in her small office outside Liu Mingwei's, organizing documents. And through the glass door, she could hear the whispers from the break room. She inhaled and looked back down at her papers, telling herself none of it mattered. What mattered was her aunt was back. She had a family now. At lunch, Liu Mingwei's secretary brought a meal box and placed it on her desk. When she opened it, everything inside was her favorite. Sweet and sour spare ribs, sautéed asparagus, winter melon, and pork rib soup. Even the rice was cooked exactly the way she liked it. Song Wanning stared at the soup for a moment, then stood and walked to Liu Mingwei's office. Pushing the door open, she saw Liu Mingwei on the phone with an identical meal box on her desk. She hung up when she saw Song Wanning at the door and smiled, waving her in. How is it? Does the food suit your taste? I asked Yinji what you usually like to eat. He gave me a whole list. Song Wanning froze. Yinji, told you. Asked him yesterday. Liu Mingwei picked up her chopsticks casually. He said your last company's cafeteria did sweet and sour spare ribs you loved. I had the chef make a version based on that flavor. Try it and see if it's close. Song Wanning stood in the doorway, meal box in hand, looking at the aunt she'd just reconnected with not even a week ago, who'd gone to the trouble of having her son compile a list of her favorite foods just to get one dish right. The shell around her chest cracked wide open. Annie, thank you. Her voice came out rough. Liu Mingwei looked up, and in her eyes was a tenderness Song Wanning had only ever seen in her mother's memory. Silly child, why be polite with family? She paused, then added, there's an executive meeting at 2 p.m. You'll sit with me. By my side. Yinji will be there too. Chapter 4 at 2 p.m. Song Wanning walked into the conference room with her notepad. A long table stretched down the center with over a dozen senior executives seated on both sides. She scanned the room and took the seat to Liu Mingwei's right. As her gaze passed across the table, it met Liu Yinji's. He sat to Liu Mingwei's left, in a dark gray suit, tie knotted with precision, an open folder in front of him. The moment she looked over, he looked up. Their eyes met across the table. His mouth twitched slightly, so slight, she wasn't sure it counted as a smile. And then he looked back down at his documents. Throughout the meeting, Song Wanning took careful notes. Every time she looked up at a speaker, her gaze would drift involuntarily to the opposite side. Liu Yinji in a meeting was a different person from the one who'd handed her tea at the cafe. Concise, logical. When he spoke, his pace was measured, but every word landed with precision, a perfect match to his financial magazine interview persona. But when he turned a page, his right ring finger tapped lightly on the paper, The gesture reminded her of the cafe, the way his fingers had brushed the rim of her cup when the meeting ended and the crowd dispersed. Song Wanning gathered her notepad and stood. Lu Yinji passed behind her and left a folded sticky note at her hand. She unfolded it. One line. How were the sweet and sour spare ribs? She clutched the note and looked toward the door. He was already gone, his silhouette disappearing down the hall. She folded the note and tucked it into her jacket's inner pocket, the place near her chest where his simple question had stirred something. That evening, Song Wanning stayed late, organizing the meeting minutes. The entire floor had emptied. Only her small office light remained on. She typed until after 9. Neck aching. She stood, rubbed the stiffness, and went to the break room for water. When she returned and pushed open her office door, she stopped. Beside her computer sat a takeout box still steaming with sweet and sour spare ribs. Resting on a napkin, another sticky note was pressed beside it. Guessed you hadn't eaten yet. Yinji. Song Wanning stared at the 2 characters of his name on the note. His handwriting was looser here than in the meeting notes, the final stroke curving slightly upward, as if after writing it he'd thought it too intimate and added a period to pull it back. She sat down and opened the box. The ribs were still warm, the sauce glistening with sesame seeds under the light. She picked one up with her chopsticks and put it in her mouth. The sweet and sour glaze melted on her tongue at the same flavor she'd had at lunch, down to the last detail. As she chewed, she smiled to herself, then pulled out her phone and sent a message to the unknown number. Got it. Thanks. Half a minute later, he replied. I'll bring lunch for you tomorrow. No need to go to the trouble. No trouble. I passed by. Song Wanning looked at the words no trouble followed by a period. All business. But the takeout box in her hands was still warm, and every single rib was coated in just the right amount of sauce. He'd even calculated her portion perfectly. Enough for one person. Not a bite more. She leaned back in her chair, looked at the ceiling, and laughed quietly. Then she finished the last few lines of the minutes, packed up, and was about to leave when her desk phone rang. She picked it up. It was the security desk downstairs. Ms. Song. Mr. Liu said you're working late, and he's waiting for you in the parking garage. Should I tell him you're on your way down? Song Wanning gripped the receiver, hesitated for half a second. No need. I'll be right there. She hurried into the elevator. From 29 down to B1. The numbers ticked down one by one. When the doors opened, she spotted the black car immediately, parked in the space closest to the elevator. Engine idling, warm tail lights glowing. Lu Yinji was leaning back in the driver's seat looking at his phone, his profile lit by the blue glow of the dashboard. She walked over and tapped on the window. He looked up, and the window rolled down. The cool night air, dry and tinged with the scent of the garage. Rushed in. Get in. I'll drive you. He said that Lu Yinji. You don't have to do this every second trip today. He cut her off, his tone flat, as if stating a fact. First trip was the ribs. Second trip is the person. 2 trips. Just right. Song Wanning stood outside the car, looking at him. The light from the dashboard reflected in his eyes, flickering. She opened the passenger door and got in. As the car pulled out of the garage, she leaned against the seat, watching the city lights stream past outside the window. In her peripheral vision, his left hand rested on the wheel, steady and still. She suddenly spoke. Lu Yinji. You're so good to me. People will talk. He was silent for 2 seconds. Then he glanced sideways at her. The streetlights slid across his face in alternating bands of light and shadow. His expression was hard to read, but his voice, in the quiet of the car, was unmistakably clear. And you? Do you think it's just talk? His question made her heart skip. She looked away, out the window. You're my cousin. His reply was short, like he was confirming a fact. Then, I know. Neither spoke for the rest of the drive. The car's warmth wrapped around them, carrying the faint scent of leather and some kind of woody fragrance she couldn't place. It was quiet enough to hear her own heartbeat. She reached up and touched the sapphire at her throat. Its coolness against her fingers made her close her eyes briefly when they reached her building. She unbuckled her seatbelt and reached for the door handle. Before she could push it open, he spoke. Song Wanning. She turned back. He looked at her, the dashboard light tracing a warm line across his face. I brought sweet and sour ribs and asparagus for lunch tomorrow. Don't buy your own. She gripped the door handle, meeting his dark brown eyes the same as Lu Mingwei's, but holding something more, something she couldn't name. She nodded, almost involuntarily. She closed the door and walked toward her building. At the entrance, she looked back. His car was still there, tail lights glowing, and after a long moment, It slowly pulled away. She stood under the motion sensor light, watching the two warm points of light recede, and turned the word cousin over and over in her mind. It never felt large enough. It never held all the emotions surging inside her. The sapphire pressed cool against her collarbone, silent and steady. She thought, when my mother gave me this necklace, did she already see this day coming? Did she know someone would recognize it? Did she know someone would find me because of this stone? Did she know the family I thought I'd lost forever would come rushing back from a direction I never expected? In a way I never expected. Chapter 5. 3 weeks into Song Wanning's new job, a representative from a partner company came to the office. Gu Chun, 26, returned from abroad. His family's trading business, a long-term partner of Shengding. The first time he came for a coordination meeting, he wore a well-tailored light blue suit and smiled with a full set of perfect white teeth. He had the fresh, easy quality of an early summer breeze. After wrapping up business with Lu Yinji in the conference room, he passed by the executive office and his gaze landed on Song Wanning for 2 extra beats. You're new. He leaned against the front desk, grinning at her. I haven't seen you before. Song Wanning was sorting documents. She looked up politely. Yes, just started recently. Then we'll be seeing each other often. Gu Chun pulled out his phone and brought up his QR code. Add me on WhatsApp. Easier for project coordination. Song Wanning glanced at the code. She hesitated for half a second, then scanned it. After she added him, he lingered for more small talk. Asked where she'd graduated, what she liked to eat, what she did on weekends. The topic slid further and further from business. She answered politely until Lu Yinji emerged from the conference room and paused at the front desk on his way out. His gaze swept over Gu Chun's raised phone screen, then landed on Song Wanning's freshly scanned contact. His expression didn't change. His tone was flat as he said, Mr. Gu, the afternoon meeting minutes will be sent to you in half an hour. Gu Chun waved cheerfully, winked at Song Wanning, and left. After that, Gu Chun's appearances increased noticeably. His once-weekly coordination visits turned into every other day. Every time he came, he'd swing by the executive office with coffee or dessert. On Tuesday, he left a bouquet of champagne roses on her desk with a note, to the loveliest coordinator. On Wednesday, he asked her to lunch. She declined, saying she already had plans. On Friday, he showed up on the 29th floor at quitting time with 2 movie tickets in hand. Wanning, there's a premiere this weekend. I have an extra ticket. Wanna come? Song Wanning looked at the tickets and shook her head politely. Sorry, I'm busy this weekend. She paused, then added, and I don't really watch romance films. Gu Chun didn't seem discouraged. He slipped the tickets back into his pocket, still smiling. Next time there's a thriller, I'll ask you again. He turned and left. She looked down and continued packing up. She didn't notice the figure standing at the end of the hallway. Lu Yinji leaning against the wall, a document in hand, watching her sort her desk. His gaze landed on the bouquet of roses on her desk and lingered for 2 seconds. Then he turned and walked into the elevator. Monday morning, when Song Wanning arrived, the roses were gone. She blinked, looked around, couldn't find them. She was about to ask a colleague when she heard movement from the front desk. Looking up, she saw Lu Yinji emerge from the elevator holding a trash can containing the rose petals and stems. He set it down at the front desk. From now on, don't bring flowers from outside into the office. Assistant Song is allergic. The receptionist blinked. Assistant Song never mentioned. I did. Lu Yinji had already turned and was walking away. Song Wanning stood at her office door, watching his back disappear into the stairwell, completely stunned. She wasn't allergic. The entire interaction, from his entrance to the disposal of the flowers, had taken less than 2 minutes. He hadn't even glanced her way, but his claim about the pollen allergy had been so convincing the receptionist now believed it. That afternoon, Gu Chun arrived again. This time he held no flowers, just a bag of fruit. When he reached her work area, the receptionist blocked him. Mr. Gu, I'm sorry. Assistant Song has a pollen allergy, and we can't let fruit in either. Please. Gu Chun's face registered surprise. He glanced toward Song Wanning's office. She had just stepped out and saw him standing there, the fruit in his hand, the receptionist blocking his path. Suddenly, she understood the purpose of Lu Yinji's morning performance. He'd simply created an excuse for the receptionist to keep Gu Chun away. Wanning. Gu Chun spotted her and waved. Couldn't make the movie this weekend. How about dinner tonight? I know a great Japanese place. She's busy tonight. A voice cut in from behind. Lu Yinji had appeared at the end of the corridor, hands in his pockets, dark gray suit, expression flat, as if discussing project timelines. He walked over and stood beside Song Wanning, glancing at Gu Chun. There's an executive office internal meeting tonight. Assistant Song is required. Gu Chin's gaze traveled between Lu Yinji and Song Wanning, his smile dimming a fraction, though he maintained his composure. Tomorrow. Then, new collaboration proposal meeting tomorrow. Lu Yinji's tone was unhurried. If you're interested in sitting in, check with the assistant's office for scheduling. Every word was polite, thorough, watertight. He closed off every possible time slot Gu Chun tried to secure. Finally, Gu Chun shook his head, still smiling, and waved at Song Wanning. Next time. Then, when your schedule clears up. He turned to leave, but glanced back at Lu Yinji once. And in that glance, both men understood exactly what the other was thinking. Song Wanning watched Gu Chun walk away, then turned to look at Lu Yinji, who was already looking at his phone as if blocking her suitors had been a minor errand. She lowered her voice. Lu Yinji, why did you tell them I'm allergic to pollen? He looked up from his phone, the screen casting a cool white light in his eyes. He was silent for 2 seconds, then pocketed the phone and turned to face her directly. Because he gave you flowers, he said, and I didn't like it. The corridor fell silent for 2 beats. Song Wanning was frozen by his blunt, I didn't like it. Her ears burned. She opened her mouth to say, but you're my cousin, yet even as the words formed, the excuse felt thinner and thinner. Lu Yinji, she said quietly, you're my cousin. He looked down at her flushed cheeks and trembling lashes. His voice dropped lower. I know, but this isn't a role I chose. He turned and walked away, his leather shoes clicking crisp against the marble floor. Song Wanning leaned against the front desk, the receptionist glancing between her and the vanished figure, but not daring to ask. That evening, Lu Yinji drove her home as usual. The car was silent, as if on mute. Neither spoke first. Song Wanning leaned against the window, watching streetlights slide past, her fingers unconsciously twisting the strap of her bag in her lap. When the car stopped at her building, she didn't get out right away. After a few seconds of silence, she turned to him. Lu Yinji, he cut the engine and turned to look at her. The interior light came on, and she could see something different in his eyes. Not coldness, not his usual work mode restraint, but a quiet stubbornness that refused to back down even after she'd reminded him multiple times that he was her cousin. About Gu Chun and the flowers, she said, you don't have to block him for me. I already told him I don't do movies. Lu Yinji looked at her. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. It's not blocking. Then what is it that it's me wanting him to know? He paused, his gaze dropping from her eyes to the sapphire at her throat. Then back up. That there's someone beside you. Song Wanning's fingers tightened on her bag strap, then loosened. The car's interior light traced his features clearly. The line of his jaw, the slight downward curve of his lashes, the ring finger resting on the steering wheel, tapping once lightly. Every detail etched itself into her mind. Lu Yinji. Her voice was very soft. If we do this, what will people say? He looked at her. When he answered, there was no hesitation. What people say doesn't matter to me. What matters to you matters to me. Song Wanning pushed the door open and got out. She took 2 steps, then turned back. He was still sitting in the driver's seat, watching her, the interior light casting her reflection across his windshield. She opened her mouth to say something, but in the end just waved and turned into the building entrance. Upstairs, she stood at the window and looked down. His car stayed for its usual long moment before pulling away. She leaned against the windowsill and pulled the necklace out from under her collar. The sapphire caught the streetlight's reflection and glowed deep blue. She pressed it against her heart, feeling its cool edges against her shirt. That night, she tossed and turned for hours. She thought about how the word cousin was like a thin veil stretched between them. She reached out and touched it. It felt so thin it was about to tear. And what lay beyond the tear, she didn't dare think about it. But her heartbeat did. It beat faster than it had when Gu Chun had given her flowers. Chapter 6. After Lu Yinji blocked him a few times, Gu Chun backed off. But Song Wanning didn't expect him to come at her from a different direction. Wednesday evening, she stayed late to work on an urgent proposal. Lu Mingwei had gone on a business trip that afternoon, leaving the materials with her before she left, saying they'd be needed by morning. Work hard tonight, she'd said. Song Wanning sat from 6 until after 9, typing for over 3 hours. When she finally saved the document, her neck ached so much it cracked when she twisted it. She rubbed her neck and stood, packing up to leave. The elevator. She pressed the down button. After nearly a minute, nothing happened. She pressed again. The screen above the doors flashed. Out of service for maintenance. The elevator was broken. She stepped back and looked at the fire escape diagram. Her office was on the 29th floor. 29 flights down to the ground floor. At least it was down, not up. She hitched her bag higher on her shoulder and pushed through the fire door into the stairwell. The lights were motion activated. On each landing, she stomped her foot, and a harsh white light flickered on. Her heels clicked against the stone steps. Her footsteps echoing alone in the empty stairwell on the 24th floor. She stomped. The light came on, but the step was half an inch narrower than the ones above. Her foot landed wrong. Her ankle twisted inward sharply, and pain shot up the outside of her ankle like an electric current. She gasped and crouched down, grabbing the railing to keep from falling. The burning ache made her forehead bead with sweat. She sat against the wall for half a minute, then tried rotating her ankle. It hurt, but the bone felt intact. A sprain. She pulled out her phone. 1 bar of signal. She opened the rideshare app, but it spun endlessly. She tried calling. The signal dropped before it connected. She stared at the no service notification and sighed, leaning against the wall, rubbing her ankle, waiting for the pain to subside so she could limp down the rest of the way. Her phone lit up with an incoming call. Liu Yinji. She answered. The signal held just barely. His voice came through. You're not home yet. The elevator's broken. I'm taking the stairs. I twisted my ankle. A beat of silence. Then his voice dropped lower. What floor? 24. The 24th floor stairwell. I'm just sitting here. Don't move. The call ended. Song Wanning leaned against the wall, hugging her knee, sitting on the step. The ankle throbbed. She looked down at her shoes. 2-inch heels. Fine for walking. Not so good for stairs. About 3 or 4 minutes later, the fire door burst open. Liu Yinji appeared in the stairwell entrance, wearing a light gray jacket, breathing slightly fast. He spotted her immediately and crossed the landing in 3 swift strides. Crouching in front of her, which foot? Right. He reached out and cupped her ankle. The pressure against the swollen spot made her hiss and flinch. He didn't let go. With his other hand, he gently pressed along the bone, then looked up at her. Does the bone hurt? No. Just a sprain. I think. Liu Yinji didn't say anything. He bent down, unfastened the buckle of her heel, carefully slid the shoe off, and set it aside. Then he turned around and crouched in front of her, tapping his shoulder. Get on. I'll carry you down. Don't be ridiculous. I can. 24 flights of stairs. You'll make it down, and your ankle will be the size of a grapefruit. He glanced over his shoulder at her, his tone flat, but brooking no argument. Get on. Song Wanning looked at the broad span of his back, without quite knowing why. She climbed on, her arms wrapped around his shoulders. He cupped her knees, braced himself, and stood, starting down the stairs. The motion sensor lights illuminated every landing. His steps were steady, every footfall solid. She could feel the tension in his shoulder blades through his jacket and smell the faint woody scent of him. Which floor were you on? She asked quietly. 30. You hadn't left yet. I was in my office reading materials. He turned the corner onto the next landing and hitched her up, adjusting his hold. I saw your office light still on and thought you hadn't left. I called. Song Wanning pressed her face into the back of his shoulder. Thank you. Liu Yinji. He was silent for 2 steps. Then, don't thank me. Next time the elevator's broken, text me. I'll come get you. What if you're not at work? Then I'll come anyway. He said it without hesitation. Wherever you are, I'll come. She pressed her face deeper into his shoulder. The warmth of his back through his jacket made the back of her neck burn. But she didn't want to let go. When they reached the ground floor, he pushed through the door and set her down on a sofa in the lobby. Then he crouched in front of her and helped her put her shoe back on. His movements gentle. After buckling the strap, he looked up. Does it still hurt? A little. I'm taking you to the hospital. He stood and, before she could protest, scooped her up in his arms. The world tilted as he lifted her off the sofa. She instinctively clutched the front of his jacket. Liu Yinji. I can walk. The moment that foot touches the ground, it's going to hurt. He carried her toward the garage, walking faster than he had down the stairs. Don't be stubborn, Song Wanning, cradled against his chest, her nose brushing against the collar of his jacket. Could smell the clean, almost sharp scent of him. His heartbeat, steady and strong, pressed through the fabric against her cheek. A stark contrast to her own pounding heart. The hospital. He set her down in the emergency room waiting area and sprinted off to register. Pay, and get her a number. When he came back, he was holding an ice pack. He crouched in front of her and pressed it against her ankle. The cold made her gasp and flinch. He immediately lifted it slightly and looked up at her. Hurt. Just cold. He lowered the ice pack again, pressing it gently back into place. With his free hand, he pulled a tube of ointment from his pocket and set it beside her. After the ice, put this on. It'll reduce the swelling. Song Wanning looked down at him crouched in front of her. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room cast sharp clarity across his profile. His attention as he applied the ice pack was almost too focused. The line of his jaw was much softer than usual. She looked at his white-knuckled fingers and tightly pressed lips, and suddenly her nose stung. Lu Yenji. He looked up. You don't have to be this good to me. He looked at her. The ice pack rested against her ankle through a thin layer of gauze. Around them, the emergency room bustled with noise and light, but the air between them had gone still, like it had been drained of everything else. I can't help it, he said, very low. Song Wanning looked at his eyes, catching flecks of light in the harsh glow. Something warm lodged in her throat. We're cousins, she whispered. So? He asked. She froze. Lu Yenji bent down and retied her shoelace, which had somehow come undone. He tied a neat bow. His voice, muffled, came from below. So I should just watch you hurt. Song Wanning gripped the edge of her jacket, her knuckles white. She watched him finish tying the bow and look up at her. In his deep brown eyes, she finally saw what she'd been trying not to see, something that bore no resemblance to the way a cousin should look at a cousin. Lu Yenji. She heard herself ask, have you ever thought about what it would be like if I weren't your cousin? He held her gaze, the fluorescent light rendering his eyes clear and open. He took the question without hesitation. I've thought about it. Pause. From the first day you arrived at the company, I've thought about it. What if she weren't my cousin? I think about it every day. Song Wanning leaned back in the ER chair. His words, I think about it every day, pinning her in place. Her heartbeat was deafening above the background noise, pounding against her ribs. She looked down at her ankle, at the ice pack, at his face tilted up to hers, and the boundaries of cousin cracked open just enough to let something through. Lu Yenji. She said softly, yeah, the ice pack is getting warm. Get another one. He took the used pack from her, stood, and turned toward the nurse's station. Then he stopped, turned back, and looked at her. His expression had settled into its usual controlled composure, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Something in the way she'd asked him to get another pack felt like trust. Wait for me, he said. Song Wanning watched him walk toward the nurse's station. She touched the sapphire at her throat. It lay quiet and cool against her collarbone, a soft deep blue in the hospital's cold light. Mom, she thought, when you left me this necklace, did you ever imagine it would bring me back not just to my aunt, but to someone else? Someone who, just now, when he crouched down to tie my shoe, had trembling fingers. She saw it. Chapter 7. After her ankle sprain, Lu Mingwei returned from her business trip and immediately summoned Song Wanning to the family home. The Lu family house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood, ivy climbing the walls, a large, old osmanthus tree at the gate. Lu Mingwei met her at the door herself and helped her inside, scolding, why didn't you tell me you sprained your ankle? And that boy Yenji, he takes you to the hospital and doesn't even tell me. She settled Song Wanning on the living room sofa, her ankle propped on an ottoman. Lu Mingwei brought her tea, then went to the study and came back with an old wooden box, polished smooth with age, copper fittings tarnished at the edges. She set it on the coffee table. Wanning. Lu Mingwei sat across from her and opened the box. Inside lay several old photographs, a yellowed letter, and a sapphire necklace identical to the one hanging around Song Wanning's neck. Song Wanning's breath caught. This is the matching one your mother and I had made together. Lu Mingwei lifted the necklace and held it in her palm. The sapphire caught the afternoon sunlight filtering through the gauze curtains, glowing a deep blue. We saved our allowance for 6 months to have a jeweler make 2 identical pieces. We promised never to lose them, and to pass them down to our own children someday. Song Wanning looked down at the sapphire on her own chest, then at the identical one in her aunt's palm. Her nose stung. The night your mother left, Lu Mingwei said softly, her gaze drifting to the osmanthus tree outside the window. Her room was empty. She took nothing with her but that necklace. I kept this one all these years, thinking one day she'd come back and I'd give it to her and say, see, you still owe me one. She paused, looking down at the stone in her palm, her eyes reddening. 26 years I waited, and what came back was you. Song Wanning reached out and took Lu Mingwei's hand. The 2 women sat in the afternoon light, the open box and 2 identical sapphires between them, warmth passing through their clasped hands. Wanting. Lu Mingwei said suddenly. Before your mother passed, did she ever tell you why she left? Song Wanting shook her head. She only said the family didn't approve of her marriage. She never said who or why. I asked when I was little, and she'd just touch my head and say, "You'll understand one day." But she left too soon. She never got to tell me. Lu Mingwei held her hand, silent for a long moment. Outside, the osmanthus tree swayed in the breeze, sending a few withered leaves drifting onto the windowsill. When she spoke again, her voice was a degree rougher. Your father's surname is Song, isn't it? When your mother left, she took your father's name. Yes. But my father left when I was very young. I barely remember him. Lu Mingwei closed her eyes briefly. Your father's name is Song Yuan. The reason the family didn't approve back then was because your grandfather thought Song Yuan's family background wasn't good enough for your mother. Your mother was stubborn. After a few arguments, one night she left. We searched for a long time, but never found her. Later, through contacts, we learned she'd gone south with your father, married, and had you. She opened her eyes and looked at Song Wanting with a complex tenderness. Before your grandfather died, he said to me, "If you find your sister, tell her I'm not stopping her anymore." But by the time I found you, he was already gone. Song Wanting's tears finally spilled over. She looked down at the sapphire at her neck, at the matching one in her aunt's palm. She remembered her mother staring blankly out the window in her final days. She remembered the trembling of her mother's fingers as she fastened the necklace around her neck. Her mother had waited 26 years for that one sentence that I'm not stopping her anymore. She'd waited for him to say it himself, but she never lived to hear it. Lu Mingwei pulled her into an embrace, one hand patting her back gently, just as she'd done with her own daughter years ago. Song Wanting cried on her shoulder for a while, then pulled back and wiped her face. Her gaze fell on the yellowed envelope on the table. Auntie, this letter, your mother wrote it. Lu Mingwei handed it to her. She sent it the second year after she left. I didn't open it, then that I was afraid it would make me miss her more. Over the years, I'd take it out and read it whenever I thought of her. I must have read it hundreds of times. Song Wanting unfolded the letter. The paper was brittle, edges fraying. She recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. Neat, orderly strokes, evenly spaced, the way she always wrote in her journal. The letter was long. Near the end, a passage had been lightly underlined and read by Lu Mingwei. Sister, I'm doing well. Yuan is good to me. Wanting is very well behaved. I've kept the necklace with me that I haven't lost it. Someday, when the family is willing to accept me, I'll bring Wanting home. When that day comes, touch her face. She looks like me. And like you. Song Wanting clutched the paper to her chest, tears blurring the words. She pressed the thin sheet against her heart, feeling the warmth and hope her mother had infused into it over 20 years. Lu Mingwei patted her hand gently. Wanting, your mother is gone, but she left you this necklace. And this necklace brought you home. Song Wanting nodded, sobbing. That afternoon, Lu Mingwei insisted she stay for dinner. She had the cook prepare a table full of dishes that almost all Song Wanting's favorites. Lu Yinji arrived home to find her red-eyed at the table. He paused for a moment, but asked nothing, pulling out the chair across from her and sitting down. During the meal, Lu Mingwei fussed over Song Wanting, piling food onto her plate, ladling soup. Lu Yinji sat quietly, chiming in occasionally. When he bent his head to pick up his chopsticks, Song Wanting glanced at him and caught his gaze flickering toward her for a split second before shifting away. After dinner, as Song Wanting helped the housekeeper clear the dishes, Lu Mingwei took her hand. Wanting, come here often. This home is always open to you. All those years your mother was gone, I was waiting for her. Now I have you. Song Wanting nodded, eyes still red. When she stepped out into the night, the sky was fully dark. Lu Yinji walked her out. They passed through the courtyard, headlights casting the shadows of the two old trees at their feet, swaying and overlapping. At the car, Song Wanting stopped. Lu Yinji turned. Your mother showed me a matching necklace today. She said she kept it for 26 years, waiting for my mother to come back. Lu Yinji leaned against the car door. Light from the street lamp above fell over him. He looked at her reddened nose and the fingers gripping her bag strap, and waited. Today, in my mother's old letter, I saw a line. Song Wanting lifted her gaze to his. She wrote, someday, when the family is willing to accept me, I'll bring Wanting home. Lu Yinji's lashes fluttered slightly. She waited her whole life. She never got it. Song Wanting's voice was very soft. But I did. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them to less than an arm's length. She could see the streetlight reflected in his pupils, two small specks of warm gold that Liu Yinji. She looked up at him. You said before, if I weren't your cousin. But I am. That can't change. But today, in my mother's letter, there's another line I read over and over. He looked down at her. Not rushing her. She said, you can't choose your feelings, but you can choose who you walk with. The night was silent for a few seconds. Moths circled the streetlight overhead, tracing slow circles through the air above them. Liu Yinji reached out and brushed a fallen osmanthus petal from her shoulder. His thumb grazed the fabric of her jacket, as light as a breath. Then he pulled his hand back and tucked it into his pocket. Looking down at the tiny whirl of hair at the crown of her head, "So did you choose?" Song Wanning lifted her head and met those deep brown eyes. All the cousin labels shattered in his gaze. She watched the corner of his mouth that barely contained, not quite hidden curved dot, and closed her hand around the sapphire at her chest. Chose, she said. I chose to come back. Liu Yinji looked at her fingers curled around the gem. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips brushed her earlobe, sending a faint tingle across her skin. She didn't pull away. He turned and opened the passenger door, glancing back at her. Get in. I'll take you home. As Song Wanning settled into the passenger seat, she watched through the window as he walked around to the driver's side. The streetlight traced his silhouette like an old photograph, at the same kind of gentle certainty that had lived in her mother's letters. Aged by time, but not worn away, she touched the necklace. In the dim car, the sapphire still glowed a deep blue. The stone that had searched for a home for 26 years was now reflected in the driver's seat, that eye in his eyes, and in her palm, right here, in the passenger seat. Chapter 8. The company's annual gala fell on a Friday evening in April. Song Wanning wore a simple black knee-length dress, hair loose over her shoulders, the sapphire exposed just above her neckline. By the time she arrived, the banquet hall was already buzzing. Round tables crowded the room, filled with employees. Stage lights and music wove together in a warm, lively din. She found the executive office table and sat down, pouring herself some juice. Before she could take a sip, someone came over with a glass. Assistant Song. New hires have to toast. Right. A marketing department team lead handed her half a glass of champagne with a grin before she could decline. Another voice chimed in. Yeah, you've been here a month, and we haven't properly welcomed you. You have to drink this one. She smiled, took a sip. Then a second glass appeared, then a third. Department heads, subsidiary reps, partners since her arrival had been under Lu Mingwei's spotlight. Tonight the gala provided the perfect excuse for everyone to approach her. She couldn't refuse without causing offense, so she took them, one after another. The champagne slid down with a pleasant prickling fizz. By the third glass, her vision was already swimming. She gripped the table edge and sat down, rubbing her temple. When she looked up, a glass of water appeared in front of her. Liu Yinji had materialized beside her. He set down the water, then picked up the half-finished champagne glass from her place. Those who'd been approaching saw him and withdrew their toasts involuntarily. He raised the glass she'd been drinking from toward the group. A small nod. She's a lightweight. I'll take the rest. He finished it in one swallow, set the empty glass down, took her arm, and guided her to her feet. Come sit in the lounge for a bit. He half supported, half led her out of the banquet hall. The corridor was quiet. The music faded to a muffled hum beyond the door. She leaned against the wall for a moment, eyes closed. When she opened them, he was looking down at her, a fresh glass of water in his hand, lifting it to her lips. Drink. She took a few sips of the warm water. The burning sensation in her throat eased. She leaned against the wall, tilted her head up to look at his face. The corridor was lit in warm yellow, softening every line of his features. Nothing like the man who delivered a speech from the stage earlier tonight. His jacket was off, draped over his arm, his shirt collar unbuttoned at the top, exposing a trace of collarbone. Liu Yinji, she said. Yeah, when you were on stage. I was sitting in the fourth row. Her voice floated, fuzzy with alcohol. You spoke for about 15 minutes. I listened for all 15. Every time you turned a page, you tapped the podium with your right ring finger. Twice. On page 7 and page 12. His fingers tightened slightly around the water glass. He looked at her half-lidded eyes, lips faintly reddened from the champagne. And when he spoke, his voice was a degree lower than usual. You counted? Yeah, I counted. She tilted her head, a small smile touching her lips. One she didn't even seem to notice. When you adjusted your tie before going up, from the angle I was sitting, I could see your profile. When you looked down, Your lashes cast this shadow. Really long. Alcohol had stripped away her defenses one by one. All those observations she'd tucked away under the cousin label. Those tiny moments of scrutiny hidden behind a businesslike gaze. Now they spilled out. Light and unguarded, Liu Yinji looked at her. The corridor's warm light reflected in his eyes, stirring something that her words had kindled, something threatening to spill over. He steadied her by the shoulders, bending to look at her flushed cheeks and quivering lashes, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. Song Wanning, you're drunk. Go sit down. I'm not drunk. She shook her head, but the movement made her sway, and she grabbed the front of his shirt to steady herself. Her fingers gripped the fabric near his second button as she tilted her face up to him. The distance between them shrank to less than a palm's width. He could smell the faint sweetness of champagne on her breath, and the clean scent of her shampoo. Liu Yinji. Yeah, you said you can't help it. So what do you actually want? She tugged at his shirt. He bent down under the pull, close enough that their noses almost touched, close enough to see the thin film of moisture in her eyes and her parted lips. The warm light enclosed them in a small pocket of space. The muffled music from beyond the door was just background noise that he looked down at her, his throat moving. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, nothing like his usual self. Too many things, none of them things a cousin should want. Song Wanning closed her eyes briefly. Her fingers slid from his shirt front and fell to her sides. Her voice was barely a breath. Then don't. Liu Yinji looked at her closed eyes, her pursed lips. The knuckles of the hand holding the glass went white. He held there for an impossibly long few seconds. Then he stepped back half a step and released her shoulders. Song Wanning. His voice steadied, but it was even rougher now. Go sit down. I'll have my assistant take you home. He turned and walked away. She opened her eyes to see his back disappearing into the banquet hall. Jacket over his arm, shoulders squared. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, burying her face in her knees. Her heart pounded like it was about to burst out of her throat. She didn't remember how she got home that night. Someone. An assistant probably helped her into a car and dropped her at her building. After a shower, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her phone lit up with a message from Liu Yinji. The timestamp read 1:23 a.m. Forget what I said tonight. I was drinking. She stared at the line for a long time. She was about to reply, I didn't take it that way, when the next message popped up, but I'd say the same thing sober. Song Wanning pressed the phone to her chest and closed her eyes. Moonlight flooded the room, quiet and still. The sapphire at her throat glowed a faint blue in the darkness. She curled under the covers, gripping her phone, replaying the things she'd said while clinging to his shirt. How much of it had been exposed in the warm haze of alcohol? Too much she never should have revealed. But when she heard I'd say the same thing sober, her heart beat faster than it had at any of his cousin labels. So fast, she couldn't use being drunk as an excuse for the thing that had been growing in the shadows ever since she'd started saving him a seat. She rolled over and whispered into the darkness. Liu Yinji, every word you say. I remember the way your voice trails off. Chapter 9. The weekend after the gala. Song Wanning drifted through a haze. She lay on her rented apartment's sofa, scrolling through her phone, rereading Liu Yinji's last message a dozen times. But I'd say the same thing sober. She stared at the line, that string in her heart vibrating with a low, persistent hum. She typed a few words, deleted them, typed again, deleted again. Finally, she set the phone down and buried her face in a cushion. Monday morning. She arrived at the office 20 minutes early. When the elevator door slid open, she instinctively glanced toward the end of the hallway. Liu Yinji's office door was closed. She looked away and walked to her desk, her pace a little faster than usual. All morning, she deliberately avoided any situation that might bring her into contact with him. She took the stairs to deliver documents. She waited until the break room was empty before getting water. During meetings, she sat as far away from him as possible, in the opposite corner. The cool distance she'd maintained over the past 2 days was executed with surgical precision. But every time she caught a glimpse of his ring finger tapping the paper when he turned a page, her heart gave a corresponding jolt. At lunch. She sat alone in a corner of the cafeteria, picking at her food, a tray set down across from her. She looked up. Lu Mingwei was settling into the seat across from her, a bowl of soup in hand. Wanning. Eating alone today, Song Wanning still had rice in her mouth. She mumbled a vague response. Not very hungry. Liu Mingwei looked at her evasive posture, but didn't press. She sipped her soup slowly, then set the bowl down and spoke abruptly. Wanning. Has Yinji been bothering you lately? Song Wanning's chopsticks paused. No. Why'd he didn't come home this weekend? Lu Mingwei's tone was conversational, as if discussing the weather. He usually comes home for dinner, no matter how busy he is. This week he didn't. Didn't even call. I asked his assistant, he said he was working late at the office. Song Wanning's knuckles went white around her chopsticks. Lu Mingwei watched her carefully composed expression. She lifted her soup bowl for another sip. Set it down, and the corner of her mouth curved in a faint, knowing smile. Wanning, have you noticed that Yinji treats you differently from everyone else? Song Wanning's neck stiffened. She put down her chopsticks and sat up straight, looking at Lu Mingwei. Auntie, he's my cousin. Lu Mingwei looked at her faintly reddened ears and smiled, the look of someone who'd been through enough to see through everything. I know. Blood is something none of us can change. She paused, her gaze falling on the sapphire at Song Wanning's throat. But your mother left because the family stopped her. I stopped her once. I won't stop anyone a second time. Song Wanning froze. Lu Mingwei reached out and patted the back of her hand gently. Wanning, what does it matter if you're not a biological niece? Your mother was my sister. Her daughter is as good as my own. Yinji grew up hearing me talk about his aunt for over 20 years. After you arrived, how he reacted that I know better than he does. Song Wanning's nose stung that I'm not set in my ways. Lu Mingwei cut her off, her tone warm but firm. If you two have feelings for each other, I won't stand in the way. Yinji has always kept things to himself. If he can say to me, Wanning sprained her ankle. I took her to the hospital. That's as far as he can go. She smiled. The rest, you'll have to meet him halfway. Song Wanning sat in the corner of the cafeteria, looking at the formidable chairman who was now telling her that I won't stand in the way. The wall she'd built around herself for 3 weeks, the cousin wall, was crumbling one stone at a time. That evening, Lu Mingwei summoned both Lu Yinji and Song Wanning to the house for dinner. For dishes and a soup graced the table. All Song Wanning's favorites, the sweet and sour ribs. Asparagus. Lu Yinji sat across from her, mostly silent. But Song Wanning noticed he avoided reaching for the asparagus dish at the spot she usually took. He'd left it for her, near the end of the meal. Lu Mingwei set down her chopsticks and looked at both of them. Yinji, Wanning, come here. I have something to say to you. I in the living room. Lu Mingwei settled on the sofa. Lu Yinji and Song Wanning on either side in separate armchairs. The warm light illuminated the air between them. Clear and open. Lu Mingwei looked at her son first. Yinji, you've been working a lot of overtime lately. He dropped his gaze. Lots of projects. You still used to come home for dinner, even with lots of projects. Her tone was gentle. What are you hiding from? He didn't answer. His long fingers rested on his knee, curled slightly at the tips. Lu Mingwei turned to Song Wanning. Wanning, at lunch today in the cafeteria. Why were you sitting in the corner? Song Wanning gripped the hem of her shirt. I wanted to be alone. You didn't used to want to be alone. What are you hiding from? The living room fell silent for 10 seconds. Orange lamplight cast 3 shadows across the floor. The distance between Song Wanning and Lu Yinji starkly defined in the glow. Lu Mingwei looked at them both, each carrying their own unspoken weight. She sighed softly, reached beneath the coffee table, and pulled out the old wooden box. Opening it, she laid the 2 identical sapphire necklaces side by side in her palm. Wanting, she turned to her. Your mother left you this necklace to bring you to me. And it did. As for what path you take from here, her gaze fell to the 2 interlaced chains. That's your choice. Whatever you choose, I'll be there. She closed the box and set it on the table, stood, and patted her trousers. I'm going upstairs to read. You 2 talk. Her footsteps faded up the stairs. The living room was left to just the 2 of them, sitting in quiet stillness. The warm light traced their profiles. A coffee table between them. Song Wanning spoke first, her voice rough. Lu Yinji, you heard what your mother said, yeah? He lifted his gaze to her. The warm light caught the depths of his brown eyes, reflecting the quiet heat he'd kept hidden for so long. She said she won't stand in the way. His voice was steadier than she expected. So have you chosen? Song Wanning's grip on her shirt loosened. She took a breath, rose from the sofa, and walked over to him, looking down at him seated in the armchair, face upturned, eyes full of her. Chosen, she said. Then she bent down, arms looping around his shoulders, and pulled him into a hug. He went rigid for one moment. Then his arms came up, slowly, steadily, wrapping around her waist. His face pressed into her side, his breath warm and quick through the thin fabric of her blouse. She looked down at the crown of his head, reached out, and touched the soft hair at the back of his scalp. Lu Yinji. Her voice was muffled above him. You said you can't help it. From now on, don't. He tightened his arms, drawing her closer. His voice came against her waist, low and rough, stripped of every restraint she'd ever seen in him. Song Wanting. Once those words leave your mouth, I'm taking them seriously. She bowed her head, chin resting on top of his, and laughed out a short, light sound that fell like a sugar cube into the bottom of a cup in the warm lamplight. Take them seriously, she said. I meant it. Outside the window, the night spread quiet and still. Moonlight seeped through the half-open curtain, mingling with the lamplight. They stayed there, wrapped in each other, neither speaking. From the stairwell came the faint sound of footsteps. Lu Mingwei, probably, coming back down for one glance. Then turning around, Song Wanting closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his arms around her and his palm pressed against her waist, warm through her blouse. The sapphire at her throat brushed against his chest with a soft, nearly inaudible click. She thought, the necklace my mother left me led me to family, and the person I chose for myself is holding me now. In the moonlight and lamplight, dissolving the word cousin into something quiet and complete. Chapter 10. After that night at the Liu house, all the restraint between Song Wanting and Liu Yinji dissolved. They still worked at the same company, still crossed paths in the hallways, still met each other's eyes across conference tables, still ran into each other at the water cooler. But those encounters now carried something invisible to anyone else. He set down a thermos beside her desk. Jasmine tea, her favorite. She slipped a note under his office door that read, "Don't work late tonight." Everyone slowly picked up on it. The water cooler gossip shifted from Assistant Song is the chairman's relative to Assistant Song and Vice President Lu. Is something going on? No one dared ask directly, because Lu Mingwei didn't hide it. At a departmental meeting, she handed Song Wanting a glass of water with a smile and said, Yinji asked me to pass this along. The conference room went silent. Song Wanting's face flushed to her ears. Across the table, Liu Yinji kept his eyes on his meeting minutes, but the corner of his mouth was hidden only partially by the folder. The most obvious change came at the end of every day. Liu Yinji no longer said he was passing by. He simply stood beside her desk and waited while she packed up. Then they'd walk into the elevator together, his arm holding the door for her. In the reflection of the elevator walls, she'd see the slight tilt of his head as he looked at her, the curve of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Friday evening, they had dinner together, and then he drove her home. When the car stopped at her building, Song Wanting didn't rush to unbuckle. She leaned back against the seat, turning to look at him. The streetlight slanted through the window, softening the lines of his profile. Lu Yinji, she said. Yeah. Everyone at the company is talking about us now. I know. You don't care. He cut the engine and turned to face her. The interior light went out. Only the streetlight filtered in from outside, making his eyes look deep and dark. What I care about is how you feel. What other people say doesn't affect us coming to work, eating, going home. He paused. It doesn't affect me wanting to see you every day. Song Wanting smiled at him for a moment, then reached for the door. As she pushed it open, she looked back. Liu Yinji, tomorrow's the weekend. Take me somewhere. Where? The place my mother used to live. My aunt gave me the address. I've never been to. He looked at her and nodded. Okay, I'll pick you up in the morning. Chapter 11. The next morning, Song Wanting dressed in a simple white blouse and jeans, the sapphire resting just above her collar. Liu Yinji arrived as she came down. He wore a light, gray linen shirt, softer than his work attire, and opened the passenger door for her. Before closing it, he leaned down, nervous. A little. She smiled, gripping the seatbelt. It's my first time at the place my mother used to live. They drove for nearly 2 hours, leaving the city, the highway narrowing. Buildings gave way to low houses, then farmland and scattered villages. Finally, they turned onto a narrow paved road where a faded sign read Tongshi Village. Lu Yinji parked under an old locust tree. Song Wanting stepped out and stood in the shade, looking around. The village was small. A main road lined with a few old brick houses. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed. The air smelled of earth and damp vegetation. She checked the address on her phone and walked a few dozen steps until she stopped in front of a small house with peeling walls. The lock was rusted. Through the dusty glass, she could see inside. An old wooden table, 2 benches, a wardrobe in the corner. This was where her mother had lived after leaving the Liu family. A simple southern courtyard. Lu Yinji stood behind her, not rushing her. She stood there for nearly 10 minutes. Then she turned to him, her eyes slightly red. She lived here for over 10 years. She never told me about her old family that he reached out. His palm pressing against the back of her head. A light, steady pressure. She raised you. And you're here now. That's what she would have wanted most. Song Wanning leaned into his palm for a moment. Then she walked over to the old locust tree. Its trunk was thick, bark cracked with deep lines. She leaned against its roots and looked up at the sky filtering through the branches. A memory surfaced. Her mother, one autumn, standing on the balcony looking out and saying, "Wanting, when you grow up, be like a big tree. Root yourself deep. Then you won't be afraid of the wind." She hadn't understood then. Standing now under the old tree where her mother had planted memories. She understood that Lu Yenji. She said, turning to him. He walked over and stood beside her. The tree's shade covered them in a cool patch of light and shadow. Wind rustled the leaves overhead. "You said before that blood can't be chosen, but feelings can." She reached up and unclasped the necklace from her throat, holding the sapphire in her palm. Sunlight filtering through the branches fractured into scattered blue light across both their hands. "Oh, now I'm choosing." She placed the necklace in his palm. "Hold on to this for me. When I want it back, I'll come for it." Lu Yenji looked down at the sapphire in his hand, his thumb brushing the cool stone. He looked at it for a long moment, then lifted his gaze to hers. Tree shadows swayed across his face. In the dappled light, his deep brown eyes were radiant. "Song Wanting, you're giving me the necklace, yet oh, you know what that means?" She smiled at him. "It means I'm giving you what my mother left me. It means I chose you." Lu Yenji closed his fist around the sapphire. Then he reached out and fastened it back around her neck, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck in a trail of faint tingles. He secured the clasp, and the stone settled back against her collarbone. "Glowing blue. Keep it," he said. "I trust it where it is. When the time comes for me to hold it, I'll come for it." Song Wanting looked at his earnest expression and laughed, rising on her toes to press a kiss to his cheek. Light as a breeze brushing the treetops. He went still for one beat. Then his arms came around her, pulling her into an embrace. The old locust tree shook its leaves in the breeze. In the distance, roosters and rustling rice paddies blended into the gentlest white noise. She lay against his chest, feeling his heartbeat as fast as hers, indistinguishable. She closed her eyes and said softly, "Lu Yenji, don't call me cousin anymore." He bent and kissed the top of her head. "Then what should I call you? Figure it out yourself." He paused, then spoke against her ear, low and warm. "Wanting." She laughed into his chest, tightening her arms around his waist. Beneath the old locust tree, sunlight filtered through the leaves and scattered across them like bits of gold. The sapphire at her throat caught the light in a small, deep blue gleam. Chapter 12. 1 year later, on Song Wanting's birthday, Lu Yenji drove her back to Tangxi village. When the car stopped under the old locust tree, she pushed open the door and found everything had changed since their last visit. Her mother's small house had new roof tiles. The walls had been repainted. The rusty lock at the front door had been replaced with a new brass one. She turned to look at Lu Yenji, who was pulling a picnic basket and a blanket from the trunk. Lu Yenji, "You fixed up the house, yeah." He came over and spread the blanket on the grass beneath the locust tree. "Summer rains were bad. The roof was leaking. I had someone redo it. Now you can stay here whenever you want." Song Wanting stood in front of the freshly painted wooden door, reaching out to touch the new green lacquered number plate. "Tangxi Village, number 28. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The furniture had been updated. The old wooden table refinished. A bookshelf against the wall holding some of her mother's favorite books, and a few new potted plants. On the windowsill sat a glass vase with white daisies. She stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, her eyes growing hot. She stepped back out into the yard. Lu Yenji had already spread the picnic blanket under the locust tree. On it sat a small cake, 2 place settings, and a bouquet of white Elysian. "Thus, Lu Yenji, when did you do all this?" "Last month." He sat on the blanket, looking up at her, sunlight filtering through the leaves onto his shoulders and hair. "I found a local craftsman and had it renovated to your taste. The furniture was chosen by my mother." Song Wanting sat down beside him, looking at the small cake with a single candle. He pulled out a lighter and lit the wick. The orange flame flickered in the afternoon breeze. "Make a wish," he said. She closed her eyes. Above her, she heard the rustle of the old locust tree's leaves. In the distance, wind moved through the rice paddies. Beside her, his steady breathing. She made her wish, opened her eyes, blew out the candle. The white smoke rose and dissipated in the breeze, What did you wish for? He asked, not telling. She smiled. It won't come true if I tell that he didn't press. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside lay a ring, a sapphire matching her necklace, set in a circle of tiny diamonds. It caught the sun and glowed a deep oceanic blue. Song Wanting's breath caught. She recognized this ring. Lu Mingwei had shown it to her once, another piece her mother had left behind. Kept at the bottom of that old wooden box, and he gave it to me, Lu Yinji said. He lifted the ring from the box, took her left hand, and slid it gently onto her ring finger. When the sapphire touched her skin, it was cool at first, then slowly warmed to her body heat. She told me your mother left this message. For Wanting. When she meets the one she wants to marry, give it to him. He looked up at her, eyes reflecting shadows and sunlight. I'm putting the ring on you now. When you're ready, I'll come back for it. Song Wanting looked down at the blue glow on her ring finger, at the man sitting under the old locust tree who had renovated her mother's old home. Her nose burned, Lu Yinji. Her voice was rough. Today you fixed up my mother's house. You put her ring on my finger. What else are you going to do? He looked at her, reached out, and brushed the dampness from the corner of her eye. His thumb moved across her cheekbone with a faint roughness. I want you to know. The necklace brought you home. The ring gives you me. He bent and pressed his lips lightly to the ring on her finger. Everything else. We'll take our time. Song Wanting looked at his lowered lashes. His earnest, almost clumsy devotion. She threw her arms around his neck, and he caught her with a low laugh as they fell back onto the sun-dappled blanket. Above them, the old locust tree rustled in the afternoon breeze. If her mother, somewhere, had let out a soft laugh. Lu Yinji. She murmured into his chest. Yeah. What are you going to call me starting tomorrow? He looked down at her head buried in his chest and laughed at a low sound that vibrated through his chest and into her ears. Song Wanting to know. Try again. He thought. Wanting. Again, his voice came lower, warmer, against the top of her head. Wife. She jerked her head up. Their eyes met, sunlight falling between them through a break in the clouds, illuminating the few inches of space between their faces. He looked at her, the smile at the corner of his mouth growing, spreading fully. If you're willing, he said. That's what I'll call you from now on. Song Wanting looked at the sky and shadows reflected in his eyes, touched the sapphire on her finger, then the curve of his smile. She nodded, her eyes curving. Willing. I in the distance. The rice paddies rolled in waves toward the horizon. Lu Yinji pulled her up to sit properly, then pulled out small plates from the picnic basket and began cutting the cake. Song Wanting sat beside him, head tilted, watching his lowered lashes as he sliced. The curve of his smile. She remembered the day, a year ago, when she'd first pushed open the door to Sheng Ding Group's interview room. The sapphire had hung on her collarbone, and she hadn't known where it would lead her. Now she knew IT had brought her to a place with an aunt, an old locust tree, a renovated house, and this man beside her cutting cake. She looked at the sapphire at her neck and the new blue glow on her finger. In the sunlight and tree shadows, the two stones seemed to gaze at each other across the space between them. Like two letters, separated by 26 years. Finally reaching the same recipient, Song Wanting reached out and took the slice of cake he'd cut for her. Taking a bite, the sweetness of the cream melted on her tongue, with just a hint of tartness. She swallowed, then turned to look at him as he set another slice on a plate. Lu Yinji. He looked up, then my mother's necklace found a home. She wiggled her finger. So did this ring. He looked at her smiling, put down the cake knife, and reached out to wipe a smudge of cream from the corner of her mouth. His finger paused there a moment. Then he leaned in and pressed a kiss to her lips. That's sweet with the taste of cake. Then don't lose it, he said. The old locust tree rustled all afternoon. Faint music drifted from somewhere in the village. A half-heard melody blending with wind and the sound of rice paddies. Lu Yinji's phone lit up with a message from Lu Mingwei. Did you put the ring on her? He typed back. Yeah. Lu Mingwei replied with a photo. Her matching sapphire necklace, hanging from a branch of the osmanthus tree in the Lu family courtyard. In the sunlight, the two sapphires glowed on their respective perches. Like a code, separated by 26 years. Finally linked, Lu Yinji showed the photo to Song Wanting. She looked down at the image, at the two blue stones glinting side by side in the sun, and buried her face in his shoulder, laughing with her eyes closed. Wind moved through the old locust tree, rustling the edge of the picnic blanket. In the distance, rice paddies rolled toward the horizon in waves. Sunlight stretched their two shadows long across the grass, intertwined, leaning against him. Song Wanning's necklace and ring both refracted fragments of blue light. Wear it, her mother had said. Someone will recognize it. She understood now. It wasn't just the necklace itself that would be recognized. It was the whole world behind it, the world that had waited 26 years to find its answer. And that world was right beside her now, bending to gather the cake plates, turning to ask, "What do you want for dinner?" "There's a place in the village that does good fish." She leaned against his shoulder and smiled, her eyes curving. Sweet and sour ribs. He bent and kissed the top of her head. "Okay, I'll have Andy's cook make them when we get back." Sunlight filtered through the old locust tree, scattering in gold fragments across the ground. They sat together beneath its branches, the way her mother had once sat here, looking at the same sky. The sapphires on her necklace and ring gleamed, each catching the light. Together,